All right, so we're back on the bike here, leaving that flooded section behind. As we mentioned in the first couple of segments, this is a different day. So the day that we did the first segment was a week ago, and what a difference a week makes. Last time it was cold and windy, and I was frozen, and I had like skull cap on and gloves, and today is like gorgeous. Yesterday was like 20 degrees, 21 degrees Celsius. So quite the change. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to be pushing our way south for the last little bit here to where this hike joins up with this exploration joins up with another one. So we haven't done our usual history lesson, so maybe we should do that right now. So this line was built by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was one of the last pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental line. And so it was going to join previously built sections. So between 1899 and 1902, Canadian Northern had built a section of line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, and then continued to build throughout the prairies. And then a few years later, they started building north from Toronto up into the Sudbury area. And so the plan was to link those two sections of line together. Now, unfortunately, it was going to be rather expensive to do. You can see we're going through a bit of a cut here, and there's a little tiny bit of rock work in here. It was going to be very, very expensive, and so Canadian Northern did not want to build the line between Ruel and Port Arthur. Unfortunately, they eventually had to, and so again, the line was completed on January 1st, so New Year's Day 1914, and opened for traffic in 1915. So here we have a marker, a culvert marker, but it actually has legible mileage on it. So it says 164.80. So that is the mileage on the Kinghorn line. And so for the original entities, which we're in the process of talking about, the Canadian Northern Nipigon Subdivision and the Canadian National Railways Dorion Subdivision, we need to subtract 49.7 miles. And so that becomes 115.1 on those lines. All right, so as I was saying, this line opened for traffic in 1915 along with the rest of the Canadian Northern across Canada. Again, you can see some of the rock work here, just a tiny little bit. Now, unfortunately, a few years later, Canadian Northern started running into some severe financial difficulties and eventually had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And in 1918, the Canadian Northern was amalgamated or merged, or however you want to call it, into a new entity along with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines called the Canadian Government Railways. And so that merger, that amalgamation, formed Canadian National Railways. And that process was completed 5 years later in 1923 with the absorption of the Grand Trunk lines. And so the name of this line changed eventually from the Canadian Northern Railway Nipigon Subdivision to the Canadian National Railways Dorion Subdivision. And it remained as such until 1960, when the Dorion subdivision was merged with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, and the whole line became the Kinghorn. Passing through a little swampy area here. Somebody left some chairs out in case you want to wait for the train. And so the Kinghorn continued until 2005, when Canadian National decided to discontinue service on this line. And then starting in 2008, they began ripping up the rails on the line, and that process was completed by 2010. All right, so as we pass through this this little over this embankment, you can see there's a culvert here. There's no marker, but that doesn't matter because we actually have a milepost marker coming up here in a second. So I'm going to pause, and we're going to kick up again in a second here. All right, so as we continue to push south here, we actually have kind of a double win situation here, a double score. So basically we have a rock cut and then we have a milepost marker. Now before I get to the milepost marker, let's talk a little bit about the you can see the nature of the rock cut here. You can see it's on both sides of the grade, and you'll notice kind of this reddish color, this reddish tinge to the rock, and you'll see it all up here on the rock cut. The rock cut itself is pretty high. I would say it's probably in the 35-foot range, maybe. So we've encountered this rock before. We've encountered it to the east, and you'll see it on future video segments to the west. You'll actually see there's a piece of rail buried here in a bit of the rock fall, and so you'll notice this. This rock is very red in color. It's very soft. It's very shale-like. It erodes very, very easily. On the next section up, there's actually rockfall warnings that were given to employees. So eventually, I decided to kind of look this up and try to find some information about this. And you know, kind of this is very distinctive rock, and I don't know why I didn't think to do this earlier. So and I'll flash some stuff up on the screen here for you. So basically this rock is, as far as I understand it, again, I'm not a geologist, so it's late Precambrian rock. It's from a geological formation called the Sibley Group. And so where we are here is actually part of the Sibley Peninsula. The Sibley Peninsula actually juts out into Lake Superior, and right at the very southern tip of it is a very well-known feature in this area known as the Sleeping Giant, and you can see it very well from the city of Thunder Bay. And so the reddish color is from the very high iron content in the rocks of the Sibley Group. And so again, this is what gives it this very, very distinctive color and sort of makes it unique. You don't really see this type of rock here. You see some around here, and then it sort of continues along the lakeshore all the way up to Red Rock, and that's where Red Rock gets its name. All right, so here you can see the milepost marker. So again, the double score here. So you can see the milepost 165, and so again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn. And so for the original lines, the Canadian Northern Nipigon Subdivision and the Canadian National Railways Dorion Subdivision, we have to subtract 49.7 miles because they started in Jellicoe, not Long Lac, and so the mileage becomes 115.3. Okay, so we'll continue pushing past this rock cut here, and again, you can sort of enjoy that very distinctive red color. One of the great things about this rail line, you know, exploring the history as well, but also seeing sort of the scenery and seeing neat things like this sort of geological formation that's not very common in this particular area is kind of one of the neat parts of doing these explorations. Okay, so we're just going to keep pushing south here. This section here is from the flood forward is not particularly long. You can see here there's sort of a continuation of the rock cut here, and again you can see that maybe not as pronounced, but certainly you still see that very red colored rock. This is where up ahead here is where we're going to start to get into a little bit of trouble, and again you can see that rock there, simply because we're going to start to turn to the south a bit, and we're going to start catching that sun kind of full bore. And so here you can see sort of the contrast. So on one, and I do apologize if you're getting some flare and some glare inside on the screen, but so basically back there we had all the rock cuts and stuff, and then basically here you can see kind of this big sort of swampy area, and I think that's the grade over there again, because it kind of makes a bit of a curve. So just sort of the beauty of the shield country, the Canadian Shield. So rock and swamp. Okay, so we're gonna hold up here before we burst back into the sunny area. And so the grade here continues for a little bit less than a mile, and then we basically will arrive at our destination.